Namaste World Racer, Sabine and Roger here. Let's watch how Hinduism inspired pop culture avatars from the YouTube channel Religion for Breakfast.
Oh yeah, this is a huge YouTube channel talking all about religion, so I'm sure he did his research. And the reason we're watching it is because there's a new Netflix show coming out called Avatar: The Last Airbender, and we watched the original series, the cartoon, a few years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, it was actually fantastic. Extremely spiritual in nature. The fact that it was a cartoon was extremely inspiring for the youth. Maybe it inspired them to get into the spiritual mode of existence. But the word avatar, where did it originally come from? And can we get back to the root and the source to see kind of what it truly means and what it's all about? It's not just a cartoon made up thing. Let's get into it. Hit that like button. Of course, subscribe if you haven't already, as we're diving right into Sanatan Dharma on this channel.
This is a graph tracing the journey of the word avatar across the pages of English literature from the 1800s to today. Notice in the late 1990s, the word exploded in popularity. By then, avatar had already become part of gaming and internet culture, referring to a user's character in a game or their image on screen in one of those Web 1.0 forums. Then in 2005, Nickelodeon published the hit animated series Avatar.
So good.
In which the avatar spirit is an entity that reincarnates within different humans throughout history, each one becoming the avatar, an individual who maintains the world's balance and harmony. Then in 2009, James Cameron's movie Avatar was released, quickly becoming the highest grossing movie of all time. In the movie, an avatar is a biologically engineered body that humans control remotely. These are all kind of conceptually related. An avatar refers to a person or entity being represented or embodied in a different form. Me as a little cartoon figure, Sergeant Forgettable name in a blue alien body, or the avatar spirit inhabiting Aang. But while avatar has only recently become a mainstream word in English, the concept is much, much older, deriving from Hindu scriptures thousands of years old. And while these pop culture avatars share some of the elements that we see in Hinduism, there are some key differences. The word avatar comes from the Sanskrit word avatara, which means to descend or cross downward. Within Hinduism, it refers to a divine descent, when a deity manifests in a new form on earth in order to restore order, defeat evil, and protect the virtuous. As a quick example, Rama, the hero of the epic called the Ramayana, is understood to be an avatar of the god Vishnu in several Hindu versions of the Ramayana. In this story, Rama is the crown prince of the city of Ayodhya, and defeats the main antagonist of the story, the multi-headed king Ravana. Now, avatara is often translated as incarnation, though this sometimes leads to surface-level comparisons with Jesus and the doctrine of incarnation according to Christianity. But the two concepts are very different. The literal translation of descent works just as well, if not better, because the deities are understood as descending from their divine abodes to the material realm. The word avatara is actually closely tied to Sanskrit vocabulary regarding theatrical performances. The word avatarana is a technical Sanskrit term describing the movement of actors from the stage wings onto the stage itself. So one way we can think about an avatara is a god like Vishnu as he takes his place on the world stage. The term itself appears somewhat late in Hindu scriptures, well into the Common Era, but the concept of different divine manifestations stretches back much earlier. For example, earlier texts like the Harivamsha use the term praturbhavas, or manifestations, and some have even traced the idea to the Vedas, the oldest scriptures in Hinduism. A hymn to Vishnu in the Rig Veda references Vishnu taking on a different form in battle. But the classic formulation of the concept is found in the Bhagavad Gita.
Krishna.
The Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue between the god Krishna, who's also considered by many to be an avatar of Vishnu, and the warrior Arjuna, as they discuss things like karma, dharma, and the nature of the self. At one point, Krishna says, despite being unborn and essentially imperishable, despite being the Lord of all beings, I resort to my phenomenal nature and come into being through my creative power. I send myself forth whenever dharma declines and adharma is on the rise. Age after age, I come into being to protect the virtuous, destroy the wicked, and reestablish dharma. The word avatara actually does not appear in this passage, or anywhere in the Bhagavad Gita for that matter, but it's generally viewed that he's referring to the concept. When he says he comes into being through my creative power, Krishna is explaining that he can spontaneously manifest in the physical world by his own divine will, and he does this with a purpose, in order to restore dharma, or social and cosmic order, that would otherwise collapse without his intervention. Generally, this means defeating some sort of antagonist that has thrown the world into chaos, like the King Ravana in the Ramayana. Notice that Krishna explicitly says that he's unborn and imperishable. The implication here is that he is beyond the cycle of samsara, the cycle of birth and death. This means that these manifestations are not like other beings who are stuck in samsara. These ordinary beings reincarnate in a different form as a result of their past karma, but an avatara of Vishnu is a new form resulting from his creative power, not understood to be an illusion, but a real body. Now, I've mentioned Vishnu a few times already because the concept of an avatara or divine descent is most prominent within the branch of Hinduism called Vaishnavism. Vaishnavism is an incredibly diverse constellation of communities and traditions, but generally speaking, Vaishnavas are Hindus who recognize and worship Vishnu, or some form of Vishnu like Krishna, as the supreme god. Avatars play a prominent role within these traditions because Vishnu is understood to have descended in a series of manifestations throughout the eons. Now, the exact number of these avatars differ depending on the text. Earlier texts like the Mahabharata list 4, 6, or 8 avatars of Vishnu. The Pancharatra Samhitas mention 29, and the text called the Bhagavata Purana gives a list of 22, but then elsewhere says there are countless avatars of Vishnu, just as thousands of rivulets flow from a lake that never dries. But over the centuries, a list of 10 primary avatars called the Dashavatara become a widespread standard, listed here on the screen.
Buddha or Balarama?
Yeah, I saw that.
Rama, as we said, is the hero of the Ramayana. Krishna, an important figure in the Mahabharata and the god of the Bhagavad Gita. Other avatars from the Dashavatara include a few animals and an animal-human hybrid, including Matsya the fish, Kurma the tortoise, Varaha the boar, and Narasimha the man-lion. As with Rama and Krishna, these are divine descents with a purpose, to restore dharma in a world gone astray. For example, the Bhagavata Purana includes a dramatic story of Vishnu descending as a fish to rescue the Vedas, which were stolen from the creator Brahma by a demon. Looking at the 10 manifestations of the Dashavatara, some Hindus noticed what appeared to be an evolutionary progression, and in the 1800s they developed a belief that scholars call avataric evolutionism, the belief that the 10 avatars of Vishnu parallel and foreshadow the modern theory of Darwinian evolution. You have a fish, then you have a turtle, a creature that lives some of its life in the water and some on the land, then you have a land animal, and then Narasimha, a literal half-human, half-animal being. So as Darwinian evolution started to be taught in India in the late 1800s, some read this progression from fish to man-lion to Rama through the lens of modern science. Now, looking through these 10 avatars, one might stand out to you as somewhat unexpected.
Parshuram. Oh, the Buddha, yeah, of course, that too.
But why would Vishnu descend as the Buddha, someone who denied the existence of Brahman, the Hindu concept of the supreme reality, the source of all knowing and being, someone who denied the divine origins of the Vedas? Well, there is some controversy, and Hindus throughout history have offered different theories. Some texts, like the Bhagavata Purana, argue that Vishnu descended as the Buddha to purposely spread false knowledge in order to destabilize the wicked. The text says, then in the beginning of Kali Yuga, which is the age we're currently living in, the Lord will appear as Lord Buddha in the province of Gaya, just for the purpose of deluding those who are envious of the faithful theist. Other traditions say that he descended as the Buddha to teach compassion, the rights of animals, and nonviolence. In his poem called the Gita Govinda, the Hindu poet Jayadeva writes, moved by deep compassion, you condemn the Vedic way that ordains animal slaughter in rites of sacrifice. You take form as the enlightened Buddha. In other words, Vishnu descended as the Buddha in order to promote nonviolence. Others argue that Vishnu descended as a different Buddha. Now, when we say the Buddha, we're generally referring to Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha that Buddhists recognize as the enlightened one of this current age, aka Shakyamuni Buddha. But most Buddhists recognize that there were other Buddhas before Shakyamuni Buddha, and some Hindus argue that Vishnu descended as one of them instead, a different earlier Buddha named Sugata Buddha. And still others reject the idea entirely. The Buddha was not an avatar of Vishnu in the first place, and instead they view Krishna's brother Balarama as the 8th and Krishna as the 9th in the Dashavatara. The final avatara is Kalki, an avatara yet to come, who will descend at the end of this current age, Kali Yuga. The Vishnu Purana describes Kalki as endowed with greatness and irresistible power. He will re-establish this whole world in virtue. As the concept of an avatara developed within Hinduism, some philosophers started to distinguish between full avatars and partial avatars, or amshavataras. From this perspective, Krishna and sometimes Rama and Narasimha are considered full avatars and the rest as partial or secondary manifestations, though some academics prefer a more precise translation than partial avatar, such as a divine descent of a portion of divine substance, with the understanding that the gods only need a fragment of their unlimited divine substance to appear in the human world. And though avatars are most closely associated with Vishnu, other gods are understood to have descended as avatars as well. For example, Gaudiya Vaishnavism is a tradition that recognizes Krishna as the source of all avatars rather than Vishnu. Mahadevi, the great goddess, is said to have descended in a series of avatars as well. In fact, the text Devi Mahatmya describes a whole series of avatars, which may consciously parallel Vishnu's Dashavatara. Throughout the history of Hinduism, some leaders and founders of various movements even came to be viewed as avatars themselves by their followers. For example, back in the 1500s, the Bengali saint 𝐀𝐻𝐿𝐴 was considered by his followers to be an avatara of Krishna, a dual avatara of Krishna and the goddess Radha, or a partial avatara of Vishnu, depending on the biographer. And even within the last few decades, spiritual leaders like Satya Sai Baba are viewed as avatars by their followers as well, though never without controversy.
Oh, yeah.
The concept of avatars even appears in other South Asian religious traditions, and sometimes in surprising ways. For example, let's consider the opening passages of an epic work by the Bengali Muslim writer Syed Sultan. Having taken the form of Muhammad, his own avatara, Narayana manifests his own portion to propagate himself. From time's beginning to its end, the Creator shall create messengers to rightly guide all peoples. Here, Sultan refers to Muhammad as a partial avatar of God, and refers to God using the term Narayana, which Vaishnava texts often use to refer to Vishnu. The scholar Aisha Irani argues that this is not an example of Hinduism and Islam melding, but rather this is Sultan's conscious effort to convert the people of Bengal to Islam. She says by referring to the supreme god in local terms, and by employing vocabulary drawn from Vaishnavism, Sultan was subtly presenting Islamic doctrine as something that was right at home within the broader landscape of Bengali religious traditions. So let's return to that avatar surge in the 1990s. We owe a lot of that to this guy, the video game developer and entrepreneur Richard Garriott, who's credited for using the term avatar to refer to a gamer's on-screen representation. Back in 1985, he was working on the game Ultima 4, an open-world role-playing game. Unlike other RPGs at the time, Ultima 4 incorporated a deep moral system, in which a player's decisions and actions directly affected their ethical standing in the game. NPCs would treat you differently based on your virtue, whether or not you were acting like a jerk. And because players are always making ethical decisions in the game, Garriott wanted the players to empathize with the character on screen, view the character to be actually you and not some alter ego. And while doing research on ethics for the game, he came across the concept of avatars in Hindu scriptures. And he viewed it as a good analogy. Just like how Vishnu descends down to Earth, a player manifests in a new world. The game's developer Origin Systems even trademarked the word avatar for a few years before finally releasing it to the public. And it's not a perfect analogy. A gaming avatar is virtual, while an avatar in Hinduism is physical. Avatar in the context of gaming also loses that salvific aspect, insofar as deities descend as avatars specifically to restore and uphold dharma that had languished. Nevertheless, the concept of avatars in modern pop culture is a great example of how religious and cultural ideas are adapted and integrated into new and different contexts, sometimes losing nuance and sometimes gaining new meanings, like a digital presence.
Wow, what a fantastic video.
Yeah, amazing. Really well researched and then laid out, and then a visual feast for the eyes, some of it, right? So getting right into Avatar and what it's all about. So yeah, we're very aware of it, but I didn't know that it went back to, the Video Gamer was the first one that used the term. I thought it was really getting popular when, of course, Nickelodeon's Avatar, the cartoon series coming out right now. I thought that was the first one that really promoted it, but no, it was being used before that in video game terms. And so very much familiar with that. I have played a few video games in my day. And and then I like that concept, especially when you are being the character, like role-playing games, and you're being that character. So an avatar, right? And then of course there's video games are so sophisticated nowadays, and even back then, that your actions affect the story, and it'll be a totally different ending, or even sequences throughout. Things will happen differently based on if you're playing, as a good person or a bad person. So in a way, like, they help you to analyze your behavior in general, and then kind of promote, hopefully for me anyways, it was like, okay, well, how am I behaving in the real world, right? So you remember that avatar, when you think about it, is that, so if you're understanding spirituality and that we're spiritual beings and we're incarnating into these bodies, like manifesting lifetime after lifetime, if you believe in the cycle of samsara and what Hinduism and Buddhism is teaching in regards to reincarnation, then here we are. So technically we're all avatars of our own spirit, right? So it's very important.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, very important to understand this, that your behavior and your actions are going to affect your next lifetime, or if you believe in like the heavenly realms or heaven or hell and where you go or what's going to happen after you die. Everything that we do in this life plays a role in what's going to happen, at the time of death. So it's very important to understand these. But when you're going into the higher term of avatar and what it means, yeah, he laid it down very succinctly, that it's about Supreme Lord Vishnu in Sanatan Dharma is the most prominent one that incarnates as an avatar, right? So what does that mean? So he's coming from, his abode, his higher realm. And then also to keep in mind, when we're talking about Vishnu, we're just not talking about some, typical classical pagan deity that is its own entity separate from the allness of existence. We're talking about an aspect of the ultimate supreme reality, just like the rest of the Trimurti, right? Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. They're all aspects of the infinite Brahman. Yeah, so in certain branches of Vaishnavism, so in particular the Hare Krishnas, so they're really taking the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita very literally, which is understandable because it is a very high level of truth. And Lord Krishna in there says that he's the source of everything, right? So that makes him even higher than Brahman and the Trimurti and Vishnu. He's the source of all of it, right? So it's just a different way of understanding the absolute reality, and everything is okay. So within Sanatan Dharma, it's about our own, feeling for the deities, right? And then once you get an inkling of the absolute truth and the truth of reality and whatever helps you to transcend this mortal coil of samsara, then that's great, right? So it's about devotion and worship and understanding the ultimate reality in whatever way works for you. And that's the beauty of Sanatan Dharma, right? So all paths are ultimately leading to the one path of transcending this ego-identified being and getting in touch with our true spiritual nature, right? So it's very, very cool. So when you keep that in mind and then you understand getting into the divine play teachings, you can see it as everything is a manifestation of God. So in reality, we're all avatars of the one divine, absolute, supreme source of reality, but we just haven't realized that, right? So that's getting into also, kind of what Buddhism teaches, and why this is a little bit controversial, because, and there's interpretations on that too, because some people will say that, well, the Buddha, he never promoted or denied it, right? In particular, he was teaching to different people in different times, and depending on their requirements, he would teach in different ways, right? So yeah, he was rocking the boat a little bit, but ultimately he was just teaching a direct path where basically it doesn't matter what you believe, and you got to contemplate this and be like, okay, well, do I need to believe in God in order to transcend the dualities of this world and enter into the spiritual realms? And actually, you don't actually need to believe in anything, right? You just need to go inside and then experience your own source, right? The supreme source within you, like the light of consciousness within, that is the only way you can experience anything. And when you tap into that, which is what the Buddha was teaching, then yeah, you can ascend and free yourself from this realm and all the dualities of this, suffering life without any sort of help at all, right? But when you understand God and what that represents, well, the very source of all of existence allows that to be a possibility. So anything is possible in reality, and one doesn't deny the other. But at the same time, we got to respect the teachings of the various masters. And if you're going to go down that path, then go for it.
All the way.
All the way. But let's keep in mind, in the theme of this video, where the word avatar came from and why it's so important, and that there is these incarnated supreme beings coming to teach the truth. It's like, so then we got to wonder, so what do these deities do? Well, in the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, they were very active, and they were playing a role in solidifying the spiritual knowledge and truth, and directing the courses of events, and then to play out in a certain way to kind of vanquish evil. Even though some things didn't happen, it appears the way that they would have hoped. Like, remember Lord Krishna, when he was really trying for peace and forgiveness and harmony prior to the big war taking place, right? So anyway, it's a big cosmic divine play, and we are in it. So what to do, right? Worship, pray, devote yourself, seek the truth, raise yourself.
And raise the world. Beautiful. Thank you so much, everyone. We love you.
Peace.